member of Knesset Merav Michaeli of the Labour Party. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
We're at a strange moment. Everyone is starting to hire advisors for an election that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu still insists is not going to happen. Some people have said, I want to rush right into the election questions and then take a step back and talk a little bit more about some of the things that you've been doing. Some people have suggested that you have been part of the problem. And the reason I say that is the law on the bill that you proposed outlawing conversion therapy, that was one of the major crises of the last 3-4 weeks between Likud and Blue and White. And I want to start there because you are in a fascinating and in a little bit of a strange place where you are in opposition inside or in a party that's a member of the coalition, and not quite a member of the opposition itself, and can present a bill that can sort of really deeply divide what is supposed to be a unity government. What lessons have you learned from that experience? And are you glad you proposed the bill?
I am honored to be considered as one of the problems in this horrible coalition and government, especially when it comes in the form of such important legislation that wants to ban what should never have been allowed to begin with, and that is trying to convert someone from who they are to being something that society or the law or some religious sector thinks that he or she should be. So I really am honored that that you even portrayed that way. So I'm happy twice. Once that I got to really bring it to vote and to get the support of a majority, not a big enough majority. I would have thought that it should have been really a consensus, but still a majority. And secondly, that it drove a wedge inside this government and this coalition. I don't think anyone could have imagined how horrible and how damageful this government would be. I was against it. I fought against Labor entering this government. And I really strongly believed that it would be bad. But I don't think anyone could anticipate how dysfunctional not only the government itself would be, but how dysfunctional it would turn Israel into in this crisis, which, of course, in the midst of this crisis, we need exactly the opposite. We need running and managing the crisis. We need
Why do you think
stability. We need to give citizens the sense of stability. We need to give them confidence and trust and something to look forward to. And it's all the other way around completely. So the end of this
why is this government? Why has this government been so? It's that when you take polls of Israelis about the first round of the virus, the first wave in March into April, there's a sense among 70% of Israelis, among people who deeply don't like Benjamin Netanyahu, that the government that he ran, the interim government running on emergency powers, really managed to to level the curve of infections, really managed to get things back on track. And then we have this unity government with a defense minister as a former head of the army, with all these people devoted and dedicated in a government defined as a unity government to deal with the coronavirus, unable to do anything, unable to seriously deliver new restrictions. Nobody has any idea where they're supposed to wear masks and how many people they're supposed to have in cars and which weddings are okay and which weddings aren't okay. Nobody has any clue. And we at the Times of Israel have to keep a very careful tracking of the decisions because it's all so chaotic. They haven't been able to deliver a budget. Unemployed Israelis in Tel Aviv are desperate, but also the yeshivas. The yeshivas are starved and collapsing. We've heard unprecedented, at least in the last decade, anger from parties like Shas and United Torah Judaism at Benjamin Netanyahu over the lack of a budget because the yeshivas are collapsing. Why can't they do the most basic thing, pass a budget, things like that? Where does that problem come from?
It comes from Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, because he has his only motivation is his own personal interest. And right now, passing a budget for the next year and something, whatever's left, what is not only, I mean, maybe you can argue if this is the right thing, yes or no, but it is the thing that he signed about in the agreement with Blue and White, and he refuses to do it. And that, of course, creates horrible chaos because take into consideration that we are carrying the lack of a budget from a year and, I don't know, so a year and something of um, continuous and repeating elections. So the economy is already suffering for a long time from a lack of budget. Now, as you know, you were describing the first part of running and managing the crisis, and then the second part. Because in the beginning, Netanyahu desperately needed a government. So it was in his interest to portray the situation as extremely dire and really inflict very severe limitations and very strong instructions, and also really frighten the Israeli public. And people were obedient, and people were cooperative. But then when he got his government under the title of this emergency corona virus government, he just said, these were his words. He said, go have fun. What was I think the phrase was like, knock yourself out. That's what he said. It's like, it's over, we won. Go for it. Yes, because he personally won. He already had a government. He was done. And so everything fell apart. Now, in order to create this government, what they're doing is they almost doubled the number of ministries, which creates chaos in the work of the government. Because if you take the Ministry of Education and you split it, and you take the higher education, also the non-formal education out of it and give it to another minister, now you have to, it's not only headlines, you have to actually take departments and people and budgets and move them and re-legislate stuff, and it makes everything just dysfunctional. So this, and on top of everything, it's like bottom and top, it's the political interests of Netanyahu. Everything operates only according to this. Nothing is according to any relevance or any professional measures. It's all hysterical, it's all populist, and that's what it comes to. That's what it brings everything to.
I've been talking with a lot of a lot of people who identify with the left and a lot of people who identify with the right, and I can't find a happy Israeli right now. People on the right, you raise Benjamin Netanyahu, and they still want him to win re-election, and they'll back him in an election, and they say it openly, but they are also very angry at him. And one of the things that keeps coming up was the day in which the Knesset Finance Committee spent an entire day with a budget bill unpassed, with the coronavirus rescue package for businesses that are closing unpassed. The Finance Committee that's supposed to deal with those pieces of legislation spent an entire day on his tax returns and on retroactively giving him new tax breaks right in the middle of the second wave as it's exploding, something for which he later apologized for. He apologized for the timing. He didn't apologize for the actual act of bringing it forward. We're hearing a lot of this, and outside of the sort of political Twitter and the debates between right wingers and left wingers who are deeply committed, people are very, very frustrated. We've seen that in polls too. We're now rushing to elections without a budget. Something that everyone is warning against. From the accountant general in the finance ministry, Roni Chizkiyahu, was saying that the country's credit rating is going to collapse, to the ultra-Orthodox because of the yeshivas, to the unemployment, all the unemployed and all the closed business owners. And then something strange happened. You delivered a speech in the Knesset. One of the reasons I asked you to join us today was that there's this whole string of things in which you seem to play a central role in how everything is falling apart. Not that you're making it fall apart, but that you're highlighting all the places where it is falling apart. You gave a speech in the Knesset about a purchase tax reduction for second apartments from 8% to 5%. You're a member of Knesset, you're giving us,
10%.
okay, from 10% to 5%. You are a member of Knesset, you're giving a speech in the Knesset, that's all well and good. Then it went on Facebook and got 1.5 million views in Hebrew about a purchase tax. Can you tell us about that and tell us why you think that drove so much emotion among so many Israelis?
Well, first of all, I too was surprised, I have to say, because when you say to yourself, what am I going to do that's going to go viral? The answer would not be purchase tax for apartments. But the thing was that my question to both Israel Katz, the Treasury Minister, and to the chair of the committee, Moshe Gafni, was it's not only the what, it's also the how. How come in the middle of the day when they were discussing some aid, I don't know, like a benefit sort of aid for the general population, how in the middle of that did they suddenly come up with this discount in purchase tax for not only second, but third and fourth apartment up to the sum of 16 million shekels? Now, that did not go through the regular course that legislation needs to take. That was brought in the middle. And I was wondering, like, what was so urgent in the middle of this crisis to give discount to people who can buy more and more apartments at such high prices? And I think
so. Just to clarify to our viewers, it's a reduction of purchase tax for a second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. apartment, up to $5 million. In other words, this is a tax break for 16 million shekels, roughly $5 million. This is a tax break.
The reduction is up to, yeah.
Right. This is a tax break essentially for millionaires who own multiple very nice homes. Please, thank you.
And also, and what they claim that it is also investors in the real estate market, and they want to. That's what they were saying, that they want to sort of awaken the real estate market, and that is the justification for it. Well, first, it's very, very debatable, and if we do even need to awake the real estate market. As we all know, real estate in Israel is very, very pricey as it is, and there was no evidence, none whatsoever, that reducing the tax brings down prices, but rather the opposite. But even the optics of it, of really giving such a reduction to people with so much money to buy more and more apartments, while people have to leave their rented apartments because they cannot afford to pay the rent. And I think this tapped into what Israelis feel. They feel this lack of trust, this lack of transparency, this lack of interest in their own personal day-to-day existential interests, in their benefits, in the common good of Israelis. And it was, in that question, because I really asked them, why was it so urgent to do it now, here, in the middle of a whole different legislation that was discussed? I think that exposed that to many, what they feel all along. And it was really amazing to see how far it went. And this goes, as you said, to people from the right, people from the left. Of course, people will say to me constantly, you are a leftist, and I am not, of course, but I totally agree with what you're saying, and especially in this speech. And really, by the way, to this moment, the question was not answered sufficiently. And even though there was follow-up on my speech in two of the major financial newspapers in Israel, still we don't know what really was the reason for this reduction.
So I have to push back. You are a member of the Labour Party, and there is a growing sense. We have, by the way, good poll numbers, large numbers. A majority of Israelis believe that Benjamin Netanyahu is a little bit somewhere else. He's not dealing with their issues. The same for Israel Katz, the same for Moshe Gafni, all the people who are supposed to It's not any one person. It's a political culture that really is a little bit is deeply detached, is what many Israelis are telling us. And you are a member of the Labor Party, which is now only 3 seats in the Knesset. Two of the three members are in the coalition, not only in the coalition, but actually in the cabinet, actually in the ministry, or ministers of the economy and minister of welfare. The Labor Party has sat in the governments of Ariel Sharon, it sat in the government of Ehud Olmert, it sat in the governments of Benjamin Netanyahu in 2009 and now. Um, is Labor part of the problem? Is Labor complicit? And is Labor even, Labor, by the way, is polling under the electoral threshold. Is Labor going to survive this government?
Uh, I'll start from the beginning of your question. Certainly, Labor was an, it really is painful for me to say. I mean, even though I've been saying it all along, but certainly a major reason why Labor is where it is today is the fact that it was part of too many right-wing governments executing right-wing policies. When I came into politics in 2012 and I went around convincing people to vote for Labor, and I would talk about how we need to reach an agreement with the Palestinians and not expand the settlements, and how we should work towards a welfare state rather than a neoliberal uh, economic and financial policy, and how we should work for a democratic Israel and one that is not ethnocentric and does not apply discrimination against all kinds of others. People would say to me, but you were a part of this. You were a part of this, because they would be right to say so, because this was the election that was after the government where Ehud Barak took Labor and gave the mandates to Benjamin Netanyahu in 2009. And so when you gave only part of the examples, but it goes back even further to Shimon Peres. And certainly this is how Labor lost its way. Now, it's partly understandable because we need to take into consideration that Labor was the lead of the camp that is under severe incitement and violence from specifically Netanyahu, but generally speaking from the extreme right, ever since '93, ever since Oslo, and of course after this, the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, which is a trauma. It's of course a national trauma, one which I think Israel still is not behind, but for a camp that believed in this way and that paid in the life of its leader. To some extent, this camp behaves like a victim of violence, internalizing everything that is said about it, uh, sort of giving into the notion that it's only its fault. It's only us, that we are only the ones who are doing something wrong. And if we'd only be more Jewish or more centrists or more, I don't know what, then it would be okay. And part of it was to really give in to right-wing governments. So as much as I can understand it, I can also, and I was against it all along the way, even when I was not in actual politics, but writing about it, commenting about it, working, doing political work outside of politics. This is certainly one of the major reasons why Labor specifically and the center-left camp is so crushed and devastated. And this is also why it was such a horrible mistake for Labor to get into this government as well. Because just think what a ray of light and what a sort of a glimpse of hope Labor could have been in the situation that blue and white entered this government and left all of the people who voted for it completely heartbroken, and what an address we could have been for those who want an alternative. But instead, Labor has to now save itself from what Amir Peretz and Itzik Shmuli did to it. Now, I think it's not lost. I believe that there is a chance. First of all, obviously, there is huge constitution constituency, sorry. There's a huge constituency that's waiting for leadership, for someone to vote for. So many people who right now do not have this address at the moment. So what we need to do is really reconstruct a functioning political body that can really play the role of the alternative and really play into it well. This time, really do what it promises to do. I believe we can do this on the infrastructure of labor, but it totally depends on our ability to take it out of the government, replace the leadership, of course, completely, and do a major reconstruction, not only in the party as a body, but the narrative. We need to rephrase the Zionist narrative as such that goes back to its origin. Zionism always spoke about equality. This is what we need to carry. We need to carry the idea of a state for the Jewish people, which is a democratic state that not only promises, but really gives equality to all.
You'll be running for party leader?
First of all, I'm fighting for having a party to, run for its leaders.
Quickly.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is what I'm concentrated in right now. I'm concentrated on really taking the party out of the government and making sure that we have primaries, so there's something to work with.
Thank you so much for your time. I want to ask one last point that came up also in the last few months, in the last few weeks. You are now a member of the committee that appoints Israel's religious judges in the rabbinical courts. In part, you won because Benjamin Netanyahu is in a big fight with Naftali Bennett, and Ayelet Shaked got no votes from the right. In part, you won because a lot of people in the opposition and some apparently in the coalition wanted you there. You are outspokenly secular, and I don't know how to put this any other way. Famously feminist. And the Israeli rabbinical courts are neither. What are you doing there? Why do you think you wanted to be there? And was it to get back at the right in one more way, which is your job as sort of an opposition? And but why do you want to be there?
I have legislation proposals for canceling the monopoly of the rabbinic courts in Israel. And the whole concept of a centralist rabbinic authority, this is something that is completely non-Jewish. It is a result of the Ottoman Empire that was here and nominated chief rabbis, and then the British mandate that came and continued that custom with nominating chief rabbis. And then comes the Jewish people, Am Yisrael, back to his own country and does the same thing, such as foreign rules in the past. So this is something that has to really disappear from Israeli legislation and Israeli society. And of course, there should be total equality. This is so absurd that the only country in the world that does not treat all kinds of Jews equally is the state of Israel. So this is something that needs to change, and I'm fighting for that constantly. Having said that, this is something that needs to be changed in the law, while at the same time, the rabbinic courts can inflict their authority on every Jewish Israeli, secular, non-secular, everyone who wants to not only get married, even those who got married elsewhere and were registered in Israel as married have to go through a divorce in the rabbinic courts. Of course, they have the final say about conversion, which is dramatic for so many Jews in the world. And so many other things that relate to the most primal aspects of people's lives. All of us are subjected to the rabbinic courts in Israel. And therefore, until we change the law, something which I will continue fighting for, at least in the meantime, I want to be able to select the rabbinic judges, who will be the most human, those who understand that humans will be humans, doesn't matter what their sex, what their origin, what the color of their skin is. I want those who can read in the halacha not only what is forbidden, but how to allow things, how to find the solutions, because the solutions are there. I know that from so many scholars, many of them feminist men, but many men who are, I would say, orthodox on the scale of orthodoxy. It has so many colors, and they can come up with so many solutions. It's high time that the rabbinic courts will be able to offer and also implement those solutions as well. So these are the people that I'm going to look for in this committee, and that's why I wanted to be there.
Thank you so much for joining us. A member of Knesset Merav Michaeli of Labor.
Thank you again for having me. It's a pleasure as always. Good luck for everyone, everywhere. God knows all of us need this.
Especially if we're going to an election now. We're gonna need it.